Welcome back to Food Criminals. Welcome back. I was unexpectedly taken off for a while, but I'm back. And this story is the Bob's Big Boy Massacre. The author will uncloak here for a bit and let you know a little bit about himself. As a kid, my family would take me out to Bob's Big Boy on Winchester Boulevard most Friday nights, before we walked across the parking lot to see a movie at the Century 22 Theater. As a young kid, I ordered the Big Boy Burger. But as I grew up, I started ordering what is, to this day, my favorite restaurant meal, the Fisherman's Platter. A piece of cod, 4 shrimp, 3 scallops, tartar sauce, and French fries. I'd follow that all up with a piece of hot fudge cake. And in the 80s, the place still had a 1960s feel to it. Not that it was being retro, but that all of that had merely lingered. The food was delightful for a kid like me, and the place felt like a family restaurant was supposed to. Bob's Big Boy was founded by Bob Wyan in Glendale, California in 1936. Glendale would have 2 other major franchises originate in the city, Panda Express and Baskin Robbins. Wyan grew the chain and made it into one of the first franchised restaurant concepts in the U.S. Only the ones owned by Wyan were called Bob's Big Boy, because he was Bob, and most of them were in Southern California. They expanded greatly in the 50s and 60s, and many, especially those in California, being built in the mid-century modern style, most in the specific form known as googie. Lots of swoops, gables. Not quite space age, but definitely moving towards that direction. The few remaining California Bob's Big Boy locations are considered to be some of the best examples of googie architecture, in fact. One that was not the case for was Bob's Big Boy on La Cienega in Los Angeles. This was done in what was known as the Chula Vista style. The chain's LA stores moved to that less dated style for those that opened in the 1970s, like the La Cienega location. It was 2 a.m., December 14th, 1980, and the day at the La Cienega location had gone by pretty normally. The last customers, David Burrell and Tammy Rogaway, were just headed out the door. They'd come into Bob's after having been at the Stevie Wonder concert that night at the Forum. Night manager Michael Malloy sent his cook, Darwin Logan, to let them out by unlocking the front door. As he opened the door, 2 men with shotguns pushed the 3 of them back. One of them yelled, "It's a jack. It's a stick-up." They moved the trio back into the restaurant towards the cash register. They took the door keys from Logan and headed to the register. The cashier on duty, 20-year-old Ahmad Mushak, asked what was happening and received a shotgun butt to the head in reply. He crumpled, and that was the first sign to the rest of the staff that things were not going to be easy. The gunman told everyone to lay down on the floor. Once they assessed the scene, the gunman ordered them into the kitchen and again had them lay on the floor. One of the gunmen demanded the manager come forward and had him lead them and the cook, who had opened the door, and the 2 customers into the back office area. There, the gunman had them lay on the floor again, as they checked out the other behind-the-scenes rooms briefly. Then, they demanded Malloy open the safe, which he did, giving them about $1,300, including coins. There were 13 people in Bob's Big Boy that night. In addition to the customers, manager Malloy and cashier Mushik, there were 4 waitresses, Dita Aphrodite Ogtane, 23, the mother of a 4-year-old, Evelyn Jackson, also 23, 20-year-old Dion Alicia Irvin, who was waiting to begin basic training in the U.S. Army Reserves, and Rhonda Robinson, 19. The busboys that night were a father and son pair, Cesario and Ismael Luna. The gunman were Ricardo, Renee, Ricky Sanders, and Franklin Freeman Jr. They herded the employees and two customers into the walk-in freezer. Mushik was unconscious, so the employees actually had to drag him in. Sanders then asked for everyone's wallets, watches, and jewelry. These were collected in a bucket by night manager Malloy, who then handed them over. Then it all broke down. The gunman ordered those gathered in the freezer to turn and face the wall. One of the gunmen said, "You're going to get it first." It's unclear who they were talking to, but at that moment they fired. After the first rounds were fired into the backs of the kneeling victims, Evelyn Jackson stood up, yelled, "Don't hurt me." She was then told to turn around and was shot in the back. Those were the last shots fired. Afterwards, Sanders asked, "How many rounds do you have?" And Freeman responded, "None." The gunman left and the survivors began to come to. A minute or so later, Malloy managed to open the freezer door, despite having taken a shot to the face. They pulled the injured and dead into the hallway outside the freezer, and one of the survivors called the police, who arrived within minutes. Burrell, Agtane, and Mushik were all already dead when the paramedics arrived. Luna was unconscious, with a serious head wound. Malloy, Rogoway, Jackson, Irvin, and Cesario Luna were all injured as well. Rogoway had more than 100 shotgun pellets in her back. The surgeons removed what they could, but many remained. Malloy lost his eye. Evelyn Jackson had a serious head wound, and surgeons managed to save her life, though they had to remove a portion of her brain to do so. The medical team operated and saved Cesario Luna's life, but he would eventually succumb to the wounds he suffered in that freezer. The investigation started with little to go on. The victims were in shock, and the perpetrators were masked or wearing scarves. They could all tell they were African Americans, but that was it. The shooters had left behind shell, and some of the coins that Malloy had handed over from the safe were still in their Bank of America paper rolls. There was an incredible amount of coverage for such a violent case. News reports and papers covered it extensively, and Los Angeles was thrown into a state of fear they had not really encountered since the Manson family murders more than a decade prior. The violence was unmatched in recent memory, and striking at a Bob's Big Boy, a beloved Southern California institution, was like striking at the heart of the city itself. The first real break came from a call by Jerry Lankford, who knew Sanders and had heard him talking about taking down the La Cienega Bob's Big Boy. He had also seen a shotgun in the back of his truck. Another lead came through that pointed the finger not towards one of the shooters, but towards a collaborator. Former Bob's Big Boy waitress Carletha Stewart had been planning a robbery, and her boyfriend and one of their roommates were the ones who turned the cops onto her. Stewart bragged about setting it up. This was enough to get a search warrant, and that led to the shotgun and rounds being found. These would be matched to the shells found at the Bob's Big Boy freezer. At Stewart's home, they found $90 in ones, along with coins, still in their Bank of America paper rolls. In a series of lineups, both physical and on video, the gunmen's identities were firmly established and provided the needed last line that gained their arrest and trials. At trial, Stewart got 25 years to life in prison for her role in planning the crime. Sanders was convicted of all the crimes and given the death penalty. Freeman pled guilty in a separate trial. He was given life without parole. All three have applied for resentencing over the years. They've had mixed results, but the victims who survived, they had no easy road. Malloy lost his eye, and it was his long-term disability and testimony that swayed juries during resentencing hearings. Tammy Rogoway lost her boyfriend that night and has lived with many shotgun pellets still in her back, leading to frequent bouts of excruciating pain. Evelyn Jackson had to go through extensive physical therapy and still suffers from terrible headaches from the surgeries that saved her life. Even two who were not injured physically were not spared. Waitress Rhonda Robinson needed significant counseling and therapy to recover from the trauma of being forced into the freezer and watching the others suffer their fates. Ismail Luna was next to his father, kneeling on that freezer floor, facing the wall, watching his father get shot and eventually die. He witnessed the death of his own father as close as you possibly could. At the time, Bob's Big Boy's fortunes were still on the rise. By 1989, there were nearly 250 locations across the U.S. and internationally. Marriott Corporation had already started closing or selling some of the locations. And they sold the group to the Elias brothers. While many of the Big Boy locations owned by other groups, such as Frisch's, survived and thrived. Bob's Big Boy currently has only 4 original locations, all of them in Southern California, including the Burbank location, the oldest surviving with its iconic sign and Googie architecture, still serving delightful burgers and chili. The 1980s were a difficult decade, and there were many crimes where the freezer would be used as a holding pen to assist in the physical assault. While Bob's Big Boy was not the first time it happened, it was the most widely publicized, and considered to this day one of LA's most shocking crimes. Thanks for listening to Food Criminals, Last Seating. I'll be back hopefully sooner than this time. It took several months, I think, with another one, this time looking at Shoney's, and then sort of a round robin of looks at the use of freezers as spots for crime, not just murder. Even though this is one about restaurant murders, but it'll go a little deeper. So I hope you stay tuned. Food Criminals, Last Seating is written, produced, and everything else by Christopher J. Garcia. Book form will be out probably in 2027, but who knows?
Star high, ooh, 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 high.